AM 96.3 FM, The Source.
All right, 5 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. I'm old enough to remember that TV show, Queen for a Day. I know you are.
Me too.
I remember watching my mom. Well, I didn't pick what was on TV when I was a kid. So I remember being home. My mom would be ironing.
Yeah.
Do you remember your mother ironing?
Oh, my mom would iron. She would call up her girlfriend, and they would chat on the phone. And then the girlfriend would get her ironing, and they would be ironing, talking on the phone.
And I remember my mom having this show called Queen for a Day on TV. And you know, in hindsight, when I look back at the life my mother had in those days, she had 5 children, and it seemed like all the ladies in the neighborhood also had a bunch of children. 5 wasn't always the number. It might have been more, might have been less, but there was always a bunch of children everywhere. And so I think, and the dads had a completely different experience. They weren't there. Like, my dad was always in the city, in New York City, working, and my neighbors had their dads were usually, it was all blue collar neighborhoods, so the firefighters and what police officers, whatever else blue collar means. Anyway, so, you know, in a way, she deserved to be the queen for a day. Let me put it that way. You know, that TV show, like, took ladies who were, you know, just kind of really putting up with life's mess. And you know, I know the prizes were kind of weird if you think about it from today's point of view. You're going to get a new
dryers, refrigerators.
Right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I think the recognition that, oh man, you really deserve a little break. I think that's the part that I wanted to focus on. Maxine Rosaler is on the phone. I probably just said her name wrong. She's written the book called Queen for a Day, and it's a novel, but it is told in stories, and I think you're going to relate to it. And even though I'm not a mom, I'm a dad, and I can relate to a lot of what I have already read from the book. Maxine, good morning. How are you?
Hi. I'm glad you remember the show.
Where are you? Where are you calling from?
I'm in New York City in Washington Heights.
Okay. Do you know?
Which is the tip of Manhattan.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Do you know? I didn't know because I grew up in that same area. I grew up in Long Island. I never knew.
Oh, where in Long Island? That's where I grew up.
Merrick. Do you know Merrick?
Oh, Oceanside.
Yeah, not too far.
Oh, nice.
Do you know, I always never knew that shows were not all everywhere. I always thought every TV show was everywhere. Like, I didn't know Soupy Sales was local. I thought it was everywhere. I didn't know that. Or Officer...
You know what happened to Soupy Sales, right?
What, with the money thing?
No, what happened was he said something horrible. I won't repeat it on the air, but he said something about the kids, you know, like really derogatory. He was kicked off the air.
Oh, I did not.
But anyway, that's Anyway, I'm glad that you're almost maybe as old as I am.
Tell me about the book. Is any of it your story?
Well, I would say that in terms of the stories, they were all originated in my experience for sure, and the character of Mimi is very much based on me, and the character of Danny, the boy, is very much based on my son.
Oh, okay.
My husband is not based so much on my husband, but sort of. And all the stories originated with that, but you know, in the process of writing them, I created scenes and I created situations and I embellished characters and I created new characters. So certainly they all originated from my experience. I don't know if you want to ask me questions. I can elaborate more if you like.
Absolutely, we have questions. So your son is autistic?
Yes, he's what's known as, it's kind of like I don't know, I hate all this terminology, but it's called high functioning autistic. But really, in his case, he's intellectually really advanced, but socially he's very backward. So I always hate those terms, but that's what he's called. Asperger's is kind of like the terminology.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you have a lot of sirens going on in the background? What is back there?
A lot of
I see. You have an air conditioner on or something, right? I hear.
No,
something.
I don't.
Okay, I hear something. Well,
I'm gonna go and I'll switch phones, but I think this phone is fine.
No, you sound fine. You sound fine.
Yeah, hi. Can you? Is this? No, this phone's better. Okay. Hi. I'm just in the city. You know, you might be hearing traffic in the background.
Oh, that's okay. All right. So the question I have is regarding just starting with the first story with the mom with the autistic child. Do you think because we know, Robert and I know some people who have autistic children or special needs children, and they seem to gravitate toward one another, and it's a very great opportunity for them to show support for one another. And I'm saying moms, but I know that there are dads in those groups too.
Yeah.
And is that part of your experience? Did you experience that?
I'm really glad you asked me that question, because for me the experience was tremendously isolating. I was really really basically alone. Benji never went to a neighborhood school, and there was never really a school for him. And there was only one woman I knew, and she was based on the character in the title story, Queen for a Day, who was kind of suffering as much as I was, because we both took it very, very hard. And some people sort of, for some reason, somehow they acclimate to the situation. I don't really understand it. However, now what I'm doing with Benji, and Benji's 26 now, is I'm doing something known as self-direction. And it's sort of almost like everything, it's like the cream rising to the top, which is a really bad analogy because cream is kind of like a positive thing, whatever. But anyway, but now I'm finding other mothers, because basically there are some of us who devote our lives and really turn ourselves inside out and upside down just to take care of our children, and others sort of give them over to the system. So right now I'm with a group of mothers who have taken charge of our children's programs, and so we hire everyone. So now I'm not so isolated. But that was a good question, because as you know, the book, one of the themes running throughout the book is the tremendous feeling of isolation.
But I also think that it happens even if you don't have a child that's special needs. I think we all as human beings benefit by not being isolated, and we live in a world where isolation is almost encouraged, it seems like. I have a real quick story I want to tell you. Robin and I are volunteers with a group called the Children's Craniofacial Association. And
really? Yeah.
And these children have birth defects, and I almost cringed when I say it that way. Their faces. No, you can. Yeah. They need surgery. Their faces are never going to be the pretty, cute little faces. And one of the moms that I met at one of these events said, "This is the best thing that I ever did, was joining this association, because now my daughter can be with other kids." She said, and I didn't know how she was going to respond to being with other kids who had similar deformities to their face. But then she told me, and here's what has to do with what you're talking about. She said, but I didn't realize how much it was going to benefit me.
Well, that's such, I'm sorry, do you want to, I interrupt people all the time.
No, that's okay. That was good. That was a good point for you to go in.
Yeah, no, I'm so happy you brought that up, because no one has really addressed that issue with me. But really, it's so true. There's something, misery really loves comfort. And it's really important to know you're not alone. And even though you're alone in the struggle, to know that there are other people struggling the same way. And, really, and you're right, even if you have like a regular kid, my first child was, kind of regular, like she didn't have a diagnosis. But I've always lived a very isolated life, because I've always been a writer. However, having a child somehow makes one really yearn for a sense of community. And I never had that, even with her, because I lived in a community that was very kind of different. I was really very different from most of the people in it. So, that's really a good point. It really helps a lot. And also, you share all sorts of information. I mean, you should see what happens when we get together. It's like we're a couple. It's like we're all a bunch of lawyers, because you have to work the system. No, it's almost funny. I mean, we all say, well, you do this rule, that rule. How do you break it? We all have to try to break the rules and figure out how to get around things. So yeah, right. That was I'm so happy you addressed that issue.
And your camaraderie with other parents really brings forth your strengths too.
Well, yes, it's really interesting too. I'm sorry, I'm not really addressing this question, but you're that particular thing. But in a way, that's true. But it was really funny, because when I first started out with this, because I did have a tremendous need for community. Again, it's something that I never really had a need for before, but I did, even again with my normal quote unquote child. And I sort of formed this club called the Miserable Mothers Club. That was what I called it. I really did. But it was funny, but there were 4 of us, but there were only 2 of us us who were really, truly miserable mothers. The other two were sort of like on the periphery, of misery. And what happens is, with autism, is you really don't know what's going to happen with your child until the child really reaches puberty. And then it separates the wheat from the chaff, and you know where you're at. And that's what happened with me. And as you know, in the book, that's what I called it. I kept on changing the character's name, but I really did. It drove my editor crazy, and it was really funny. But anyway, what happens is, Danny, that's his new name, he's 13, and that's when Mimi is really coming to grips with the fact that he's never going to recover. And a lot of it, and this all very reflective of my experience, because what we started out with was this thing called, I don't know if you know about it, it's called ABA, Applied Behavioral Analysis. And they really sell parents a bill of goods, man. It's like they say that your kid's going to get cured, 47% cure rate. And so for years you believe your kid is going to be cured. And I held on to that for a long time, way past the time my husband did. And I think that there has to be a lot of self-delusion and self-denial, denial involved in being the parent of a child with special needs, quote unquote. I don't like that term either, because you can't really absorb the enormity of it all at once. You can't.
But from your experience, I mean, it seems like it's, not to be too corny, I can hear it already coming out of me sounding corny, but I mean, it's really all about love. I mean, if you...
Oh, that's not corny at all. No.
Okay.
No, that's not corny, because that's exactly what it's about. It's about, let me just sort of like say something else. Well, finish what you were saying, because see how rude I am? You can imagine how much my husband... my husband, let me talk.
Maxine, first of all, I love talking to you. It sounds like I'm talking to a friend. Did I say your last name? Pronounce your last name.
No, it's okay. Everyone mispronounces it. Rosaler.
Rosaler. Okay, now I got it.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess all I was saying is based on a guy. Yeah, bless you. Based on a guy I know. He's 57 years old. I've known him since he was 11, and he has Down syndrome. And I knew his mother, and I know that the reason he is so high functioning as a Down syndrome person is because of the love of his mother. I know that. In my mind, there's no doubt.
Yes, really is. Yeah, this is what I've always believed in. My primal belief in life. My primal, is that the right word? I don't know. My basic, my fundamental belief in life is I believe in the power of love over all else, okay? However, that said, a lot of parents, and I don't want to disparage these parents in any way, because it's a terrible thing, but a lot of parents who have children with handicapped children, because for some reason I just don't like that term, special needs. It really is a euphemism. But a lot of parents with handicapped children get into the idea of unconditional love, and they're so filled with unconditional love that somehow it sustains them. And I think it almost, and I really hate to say this because it almost blinds them to the ultimate horror of it all, which is, what the hell is going to happen to our children when we're dead? So I live with this.
Yeah.
So I live with this awareness constantly. In fact, I call it the it's like the I forget what I call it, but anyway, I wrote a whole. I really do. It's like my mind is just going, because after all, I am old enough to remember Queen for a Day. But anyway, it really is. We live in terror right now. It's almost as though we were all struck by lightning or something, and now all of us parents in this program called Self-Direction are all trying to get together and come up with a death plan. That's what I call it, the death plan. And but it's. So I'm saying that sure, the love is there, but the love isn't of course, the love is fundamentally unconditional, but as Mimi, AKA me, there's a lot of frustration, and one does get angry. Some parents don't, maybe, but I'm not like that. I'm not a saint. And that's another point I wanted to make with my book, is that, mothers who have children with disabilities are not automatically anointed with sainthood.
Right.
No, exactly.
No, of course
exactly. They have to have their own support system. And then there's the worry on the monetary side. You need to have funds.
Oh, it's horrifying. I mean, what happened with me was I had to lay out, and that story is actually based on truth, too. Again, all the stories had the kernel of truth. And I actually had to lay out like over $100,000. And we're both my husband and I are writers, and we don't make much money. I had to borrow it. And I hired this advocate who completely screwed me.
Oh.
And really, it was horrifying. And I had to go and fight for 10 years to get that money back. And everyone said I would never get it back. And it was interesting because when I was first, when Benji was first diagnosed, I went all around the country by telephone talking to other parents, because parents are always your totally best resource. I mean, no one compares to them. And a lot of parents said that fighting the system is going to be worse than the autism. And I couldn't conceive of that. But you know what? It's true. Because it's so ugly. So it's like rubbing salt in a wound.
Well,
that's what it's like.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. I think, no, I'm not trying to insult every state worker out there, but I often think that the state workers are condescending. They will talk to the moms and the dads as if they know more. And
it's not.
No,
you go on.
Well,
I'm going to interrupt you again because I'm so rude.
That's okay.
No, it's not. It's not just that they're condescending. Some of them are vicious. Some of them, it's sort of like it's almost like they're weeded out. It's kind of like I spent years trying to figure this out, like that thing called corporate culture. And for some reason, they always pick people who are just out there to get parents. There was someone who once told one of the people I hired, and I must have hired over 100 people to work with Benji for over 20 years, and she actually told one of the people that Maxine, is unprofessional, and we're going to teach her a lesson. I mean, they were really, really vengeful. It was so ugly. So it really made my experience 10 million times worse, and it made me have to spend so much time fighting the system and dealing. And I'm overly sensitive about the cruelty of people. I just really can't deal with it. And so I had to deal with that too. It was horrible.
Yeah, and that's really hard because other people have that holier than thou attitude, and you're struggling with reality, and they've got a 9-to-5, handle on you and your son, and then at 5 o'clock it's like, okay, I'm done, I'm going home.
Exactly. That's right. That's just what they're like, but it's beyond that, because it's almost like the money is there. It's really funny. It's like I once wrote this short story like over 30 years ago, and my character is a Jewish merchant, and he says the money, it stays in their hand, and they think it's theirs. And these people, gets warm, they think it's theirs. Whatever. You can't really get the reference. You'd have to read the story. But anyway, it's almost as though it's their money. And it was really interesting because at the Board of Education, which is what it was called then, there was one woman, her name was Joan Hauser, and she hated working there, and she was so ashamed, and she and I were like thieves in the night trying to scheme to get Benji services. And they actually went and they kicked her out. They created some phony case against her. So it really is like Kafkaesque. It really is. You wouldn't believe it. It's like really, bureaucracy is a nightmare because it's so inhumane.
But then when you do have people that have special needs and they get attached to their caseworkers, they think that those caseworkers are their friends. Well, they're their friends only because they're getting paid for it. But once they're not getting paid anymore, those caseworkers disappear, and then there's this emotional impact.
You really know this stuff, don't you? I mean, it's so unusual to talk to people who actually read the book and understand the situation. Yes, that's very true. And, I mean, Benji's not like that because Benji, for some reason, doesn't attach to anyone except for Phil and me and Sammy. Sammy's our daughter. But he does get attached to his mentors. Actually, he does now. But what I'm doing now is I have this little scheme going where I'm trying to seduce people. And I'm so glad Larry, right? Larry,
yeah.
I mean, right. I don't have to call you Mr. Whitler or anything.
No.
Okay, I'm just joking. But anyway, it's really weird because and it's not weird, but my master plan is to find people who love Benji. And I'm not really, if someone doesn't love Benji, even if the person's a competent worker, I fire them. Because I just want people who love Benji. And my feeling is, I figure maybe I have 20 more years to live if I'm lucky. And in the next 20 years, I just want to find as many people who love Benji as possible with the hope that they will be around to look after him in some capacity or another, not like one-on-one, but just to sort of take over for me when I'm dead. And really, love is the most important thing.
Yeah, Maxine, I don't know, but I'm just thinking that nobody's ever going to love him more than you and his father.
Well, that's the tragedy of it. It really is true. That is the tragedy of it. And it's funny. I'll tell you something else, which I haven't written about, which is interesting. That's you're gonna make me cry. You really are. I mean, it's horrible. It's true. No one ever will. No. But and he will never be as attached to us as he is attached to anyone because he doesn't attach to other people. But it was interesting. There was this woman who I wrote about in the story of Annie Sullivan, and I hated this woman. She was the advocate who screwed me, and I had to create a whole other story for her. I had to go and interview another mother to sort of create a positive side to her because you can't really write about characters or straight evil. And really, for me, she was the epitome of evil. She really was. And she once told me she had a special needs kid, quote unquote, and I said to her once, well, what's gonna happen to him when you die? And this was when I was still deluding myself into thinking Benji was gonna be okay. And she said, well, I hope he goes with us.
Oh.
That's pretty heavy.
Oh, man, yeah.
Oh,
that's pretty heavy.
So I just want to say this, that I think he's never going to find somebody who loves him as much, but I also think that had you and your husband not loved him as much in his life, that he would not be as high functioning as he is. And so therefore that love that you gave him when you're gone is going to maintain him. The friend we have, the 57-year-old, his mother did die. And I fought to make sure he was living independently until he had some physical needs that I had to relinquish my fight and allow him to be in a group home. But I made sure, and his brothers live in California, so it's like 3,000 miles away. So pretty much it's Robin and me. And
well, wow! I mean, I need a you. That's what I need. I need a you.
Well, and in a way, yeah, I think that's it. I mean, we're the closest thing he has to family. We're the closest thing to having somebody who actually loves him. And so the best we can do, we take him out once in a while. We took him out to a fish fry the other day, and I try to go to breakfast with him every Sunday, and I think that's where your son is going to find somebody like that. And I don't know if you believe in God, but I think God will find somebody.
Well, I don't necessarily believe in God. I believe in I do believe in the power of goodness and love. The force that through the few, I'm quoting Dylan Thomas here, pretending to, which is, I'm really not very erudite. But I do believe in that. There's a poem of, the force that through the green fuse drives, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so, I do believe I believe in the force of goodness. I really do. And wow, how did you know, how did you get attached to this person.
I lived right next door to him. We moved from Long Island. I was 17. We moved to Florida, and he was from Merrick too, as a matter of fact.
And he was 11 at the time.
He was 11.
And now
I was
he's
17. So 6
yeah.
years difference, but you know. So.
Well, that's, wow, is he lucky? And that's just what I want. It's funny, really, I just have to say, what I want to say? And this is something I've never said. God bless you, really, because that's really just amazing that you did that. And that's just what I want to find. Now I have his violin teacher. Benji is really he's very good at violin. His violin teacher adores him, and I'm always telling her, oh God, I wish you were like 30 years younger. And she keeps on telling me, well, her family, she's going to live until 100. So she's, she's 55. So anyway, and then I had someone else, this girl who just adored him, and I really did believe her love ran really deep. I believed in the love, but she moved to Colorado. So that's why I have to sort of amass as many people as possible who love Benji, and there are some. I've really been amazed at how many good people I've found.
Wow.
And how good I've gotten at figuring out that people, the bad ones who I deceive myself into thinking are good, and I figure it out.
Yeah.
So
and I think what the conversation you and Robin had earlier about the ulterior motives for showing love, which is a paycheck, it's not the same thing, and so gosh, I've loved this conversation. The book is called Queen for a Day. If you've been listening and you can relate to what Maxine has been talking about, you might like the book.
Very good read.
You're a really talented writer. So have a copy of the book. It's called Queen for a Day. Call me if you want the copy that was sent to me, and I'll leave it here on the desk for you. The rest of us have to go buy it. I did find it on Amazon. Do you have a website you want to recommend?
I'm in the process of making one now, but it's just going to be Maxine Rosaler. It should be up like next week.
Okay, and you can always get it on Amazon. It's on Amazon, and let's see, it's got Kindle version, and you have the paperback. It looks like a hardcover, and you're doing pretty good.
I am?
Yeah, well, it's out of millions of books. You're number 216 in the Jewish category.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, not too bad. You do.
Also, it was not, just to sort of blow my own horn a little bit for your listeners. It was nominated for a National Book Award, and it was also nominated for the Kirkus Prize, which apparently is a big deal. So that's nice. But I just kind of say one more thing before we get off the air. But
sure.
It was really interesting, my reaction to this, getting this book published, because I'm really old, and I've been writing for over 35. I've been writing for over 35 years, and I've been published my short stories, and I've published other stuff, but this is the first novel I've published. And really, my first reaction and only reaction to it was, although of course I want literary recognition, was, God, the mothers, I'm doing something. Maybe I'm doing something for the mothers, because the mothers seem to really appreciate it. Because I think reading really is about identification.
Absolutely. Oh yes.
So
I the early stories we told at the beginning of this conversation, where we were talking about the ladies at the children's craniofacial and the dads, not just the moms. But we were talking about the parents. I think this book serves that purpose. I can imagine, for example, a lady doing the laundry at the laundromat, and somebody left a copy of your book sitting on top of one of the washing machines. She picks it up, she sits down, all of a sudden she's got a sense of comfort just knowing that she's not alone.
Well, yeah, I want to say, I know that we're off the air and you can just cut this off, but I just want to say one more thing.
No, we're still on the air.
We're still on the air.
Oh, okay. Okay, but anyway, I'll just want to say this, that Benji's violin teacher's mother is like 82 years old. She's got a kid who's 55 with Asperger's syndrome, and she read my book, and she was so grateful to me. She actually, her daughter told me, and I really hate to say this because it sounds so self-serving, but she said it changed her life because she's been feeling so guilty about her bad feelings. Can you imagine? She's been living with this for over 50 years. Yeah. So I guess it's, and I was afraid. I didn't think that the mothers of handicapped children would like my book, since it's sort of like, it's so dark. But it's also funny, folks.
No,
It is.
you
You're
are
good
funny.
humor.
Yeah, as I say, you're a good author. What a great conversation, Maxine. Thank you so much for being on the air with us. There's no website we necessarily want to promote other than the book itself, Queen for a Day, Maxine Rosaler. And go find it. It's a beautiful book, and I hope you come back on with the next one.
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure. Real pleasure.
Oh, you're welcome. All right.
Okay.
We'll be right back.
With a graduate degree in management and leadership from Webster University, there'll never be a better time for you to explore what's next in your career. Classes are scheduled so you can continue your normal workday routine, and the accelerated program means a new term starts about every 10 weeks. If you're looking to gain a broad general management and leadership perspective, then Webster University's management and leadership degree program is the right one for you. It's all a part of what's next at Webster University.
Go to webster.edu.